Billionaire thought he'd left the past behind until his ex-wife showed up with triplets who looked just like him. Jonathan Cross believed he had banished all traces of his old life when he left behind his modest upbringing and tumultuous marriage. With a thriving tech conglomerate under his command and an immaculate penthouse overlooking the Chicago skyline, he told himself he had transformed into someone new, someone with no scars, no regrets, and no haunting secrets. But the past has a way of cracking even the strongest facades. One autumn afternoon, a single knock at his office door unraveled everything. Standing before him was the last person he ever expected to see again. His ex-wife, holding the hands of 3 children who looked exactly like him. Jonathan Cross was not born into wealth. He grew up in a small townhouse on the outskirts of Portland, Oregon, where the rain seemed endless and hope was often overshadowed by gray skies. His mother, Linda Cross, worked 2 jobs to support him and his younger sister, Samantha. Their father had walked out when Jonathan was 10, leaving behind only debts and a collection of empty beer bottles as painful reminders of his failure to be a responsible parent. Despite the pain of paternal abandonment, Jonathan channeled his feelings into an unwavering determination. While other boys played in the neighborhood, he studied old computer parts and taught himself programming. He lugged home battered CPUs from garage sales, tinkering with them until they sprang to life in a swirl of wires and open code. He excelled in school, earning scholarships that opened doors to the country's best colleges. By the time he turned 23, he had graduated from Stanford with top honors in computer science and business. He launched his first startup, CodeSpark Innovations, from a cramped dorm room. 5 years later, CodeSpark went public, making Jonathan a millionaire several times over. With each new venture, his reputation soared, and by the time he was in his early 30s, Jonathan Cross commanded Cross-Tech Industries, a formidable tech conglomerate spanning the globe. Despite that glittering success, something always felt incomplete. At Stanford, Jonathan encountered someone who lit up his future in a way all his success never could: Caroline Matthews. She was brilliant, adventurous, and thoroughly unpredictable, a journalism major with boundless curiosity. The moment she sat beside him during a networking event, asking if the free pizza was any good, he fell a little in love with her spark. Caroline wrote for the school paper and sought truths in every corner of campus, from investigating cafeteria food quality to high-profile interviews with visiting CEOs. She saw in Jonathan something beyond a boy obsessed with bits and bytes. She saw potential for greatness in both business and love. Her unwavering belief in him became a driving force behind his next big ideas. Their romance progressed at breakneck speed. Late-night brainstorming sessions, stargazing on empty soccer fields, stolen kisses between library aisles. She was his confidant and the first person he trusted enough to share his deepest fears. He told her about his father's abandonment and the pressure he felt to succeed at any cost. Her empathy became the salve to his old wounds, and her passion awakened something deeply tender in his heart. By the time they were both about to graduate, Jonathan proposed. On a warm evening under the campus clock tower, Caroline said yes, and they sprinted hand in hand into a future that promised nothing but triumph. They married 2 weeks after commencement, impulsive, romantic, and fearless. Jonathan had accepted a seed investment to launch CodeSpark Innovations, and Caroline secured a junior reporter role at a local paper. The newlyweds moved into a cramped apartment in Silicon Valley, living off takeout meals and pure ambition. But in that suffocating closeness, they found warmth in each other's presence and an optimistic vision of what lay ahead. Their arguments were rare but intense, clashes of 2 passionate souls under constant pressure. Caroline spent her days chasing down investigative leads, often returning home long past midnight. Meanwhile, Jonathan worked endless hours, drafting code and meeting venture capitalists. Sleep was an afterthought. Money was tight in the beginning, but Caroline never cared. Her focus was on uncovering stories that mattered. Jonathan promised her that once CodeSpark took off, they'd travel the world together: Rome, Paris, Tokyo, places she yearned to see. They made lists of dream destinations on crumpled receipt paper, confident that it was only a matter of time before their fantasies became reality. But success arrived sooner than either had dared to hope. Within 18 months, CodeSpark was the hottest name in artificial intelligence software. Contracts poured in, and Jonathan became an in-demand wonderkin. As the company flourished, he found himself consumed by board meetings, pitch sessions, and ceaseless expansions. That was when cracks started showing in their once vibrant marriage. Fame came with a price. Jonathan and Caroline suddenly had money to do anything, but they had no time to do it. He was constantly traveling for conferences, pitching to influential investors, or sparring with competing tech firms. Caroline's newsroom responsibilities intensified as she gained recognition for her incisive articles on corporate corruption. For every big break she got, Jonathan chalked up another victory in the relentless pursuit of exponential growth. Conversations turned into tense negotiations for a few stolen hours together. Jonathan had a new circle of colleagues, fellow CEOs, power brokers, venture capitalists, people who lived in a world of private jets and exclusive clubs. Caroline, on the other hand, navigated the swirling storm of deadlines, editorial politics, and an undercurrent of moral conflict when her stories collided with the interests of big companies. Companies that, increasingly, counted Jonathan's budding empire among their allies. She had begun investigating allegations of unethical practices at a fast-rising tech corporation. To her shock, the trail of evidence pointed dangerously close to CodeSpark's affiliates. The situation forced her to question Jonathan's approach. Was profit overshadowing the ethics they once held dear? By the time Caroline confronted him, Jonathan was defensive. Tired of living in a cloud of suspicion, he insisted she was misunderstanding the situation. Late-night arguments escalated to shouting matches, each culminating in cold silences that bled into days. Romance had morphed into resentment, chipping away at their fragile bond. One final argument ended it all. Caroline presented evidence suggesting one of CodeSpark's major partners was engaged in illegal data mining. She believed Jonathan had known, or at least suspected. He denied it vehemently. Outraged, she would think he could stand by such dishonesty. In a moment of frustration, he accused her of seeking sensational headlines at the expense of his life's work. When Caroline demanded clarity on whether he'd cut ties with the shady partner, Jonathan evaded her. Career ambitions had led him down a murky path, one that threatened the moral center Caroline had always admired in him. Enraged, she declared she could no longer trust him if he didn't address the matter. And Jonathan, equally wounded, yelled that she seemed bent on tearing down everything he'd built. Tears streamed down Caroline's face as she grabbed a suitcase, slammed it shut with trembling hands, and walked out. In the morning, he discovered she'd already filed for separation. The relationship that had once ignited his soul was in ashes. Their divorce was swift, overshadowed by Jonathan's newfound wealth. Reporters hounded them both, hungry for gossip. Caroline retreated to the East Coast and refused alimony, determined to succeed on her own. Jonathan stayed in Silicon Valley, burying himself deeper in the tech world's cutting-edge expansions. He told himself it was for the best. She was gone, and he was free to conquer the future without the weight of a past that refused to align with his ambitions. After the divorce, Jonathan transformed. He moved Cross-Tech Industries' headquarters to Chicago, seeking a fresh start in a city with a relentless drive that matched his own. He crafted a polished image, a mogul who had overcome a humble upbringing and heartbreak to helm one of the fastest-growing tech empires. While Jonathan's star rose, the pain of losing Caroline lingered beneath the immaculate suits and million-dollar smiles. He publicly avoided mention of her, and in private moments, he almost never spoke her name, even to his closest confidant, Melissa Clark, his longtime personal assistant and friend since college. Melissa respected his unspoken request, though she glimpsed the sorrow behind his eyes whenever a faint reminder of Caroline surfaced. Despite the churning guilt and unacknowledged heartache, Jonathan found ways to distract himself. Lavish charity events, strategic acquisitions, and a small circle of influential acquaintances. Over the years, he dated several prominent women, never letting any get truly close. In social circles, he was the ultimate enigma, a self-made billionaire who preferred a guarded life. When the media occasionally pried about his personal history, he brushed off questions with carefully rehearsed lines. His success soared, and soon enough he was a fixture on the covers of business magazines. Jonathan Cross had perfected his reinvention. He thought the past was truly buried. The day his world cracked open again began like any other. Jonathan was in his top-floor office at Crosstech Tower, finalizing a merger with a European robotics firm. The panoramic windows showcased Chicago's skyline glittering in the midday sun. He hung up the phone, satisfied with the outcome of yet another negotiation. Just then, Melissa knocked quietly on the door. Typically, she would buzz through the intercom, announcing visitors. This time, she entered with an anxious expression. "Jonathan, you might want to brace yourself," she whispered, voice tight with concern. Before he could question her, the door swung wider to reveal Caroline standing behind her. Jonathan's heart lurched. Caroline Matthews, once Caroline Cross, looked older and more refined than the wide-eyed college reporter he'd married. She wore a fitted navy dress, her auburn hair swept into a sleek ponytail. But what startled him most were the three young children peering out from behind her legs. Each child bore striking green eyes and the unmistakable features of a cross. Caroline's gaze locked with his, equal parts apprehensive and resolute. "Hello, Jonathan," she said softly. The room crackled with tension. In an instant, 1,000 old memories flooded his mind, the echoes of their last, bitter confrontation reverberating in the silent space. It felt as if the air had been sucked out of the office. Jonathan slowly rose from his chair, disbelief etched on every feature. Caroline rested a gentle hand on the shoulder of one child, a boy whose hair was as dark as Jonathan's. The other two, a boy and a girl, blinked at him curiously, their resemblance to him impossible to ignore. He searched Caroline's face for answers. A tumult of anger, confusion, and a strange flicker of hope stirred in his chest. It had been 8 years since their divorce. How could she have? And why had she waited so long to reappear? Melissa, sensing the gravity of the moment, placed a silent hand on Jonathan's desk, offering moral support. Caroline seemed composed, but her voice trembled when she finally spoke. "These are your children, Jonathan," she said, her eyes glistening. "Alex, Daniel, and Marisa." An avalanche of questions drowned Jonathan's mind. Why had Caroline never told him about the pregnancy? Why now, after all these years? And what could he possibly say to these kids who stood there, a living, breathing testament to the past he had tried to forget? Caroline inhaled sharply, mustering courage. "I'm sorry for barging in on you like this, but I didn't know how else to do it. There's a lot to explain, but the kids, they deserve to know you, and you deserve to know them." Jonathan's initial shock gave way to a swirling hurricane of emotions. Anger at Caroline for keeping the children a secret, guilt for possibly contributing to whatever forced her decision, and an unspoken terror at the idea of being a father. His voice emerged rough and strained. "You should have told me." Caroline's lips quivered. "I planned to many times, but life—" She trailed off, blinking back tears. "By the time I discovered I was pregnant, our marriage was already dissolving. You were so wrapped up in controversies around CodeSpark. You'd changed, Jonathan. I was scared of what that meant for our children. I honestly thought they might be better off without you, without all the chaos and the media spotlight." He let that sink in, bitterness rising like bile in his throat. "So you decided for me?" he asked, voice dangerously quiet. "You decided I wasn't fit to be a father?" She glanced down, shame etched across her face. "I made a choice I thought was right at the time, but I've regretted not telling you sooner, especially when the kids started asking about their dad. I don't expect forgiveness, but they should at least have the opportunity to know who you are." Behind Caroline's trembling figure, 3 young, innocent faces observed them, confusion and curiosity filling those unmistakable green eyes. In the hush that followed, the past and present collided in a tangle of raw, uncharted emotion. Jonathan, uncertain how to proceed, motioned for them to sit on the sleek leather sofa lining the far wall of his office. The children, triplets around 7 years old, shuffled in with timid steps. Caroline guided them gently. Melissa discreetly excused herself, leaving them alone in that cavernous space of glass and steel. Caroline introduced each child, her hand resting lightly on their shoulders. Alex, the eldest by a few minutes, had Jonathan's piercing gaze and a confident stance, even if he was clearly apprehensive. Daniel clung to his mother's arm, his curiosity tempered by shy caution. Marissa peeked around her brothers, a spark of boldness in her wide eyes. Jonathan sat across from them, elbows on his knees, trying to appear calm when he felt anything but. "Hi," he began softly. I'm Jonathan. I guess I'm your father." The final word felt foreign on his tongue. They nodded, exchanging uncertain glances. Caroline cleared her throat. "They've known about you for a while, Jonathan. I told them that you lived far away and were very busy. They've seen pictures." Her voice broke slightly. "I never spoke badly of you. I just didn't know how to handle everything." Jonathan swallowed the regret swirling inside him. He forced a smile for the children's sake. "I'm glad you're all here," he managed, his heart hammering in his chest. He realized that, no matter how furious he was, these kids deserved more than his anger. They deserved answers and love. The conversation that followed was stilted, peppered with hesitant questions from the children and guarded responses from Jonathan. He learned about their lives on the East Coast, how they'd grown up in a quiet suburb near Washington, D.C., where Caroline worked as an investigative journalist. They told him about their favorite soccer teams, their pet turtle named Shelley, and their love of reading mystery novels. Jonathan's chest constricted with each small detail of a life he'd missed. Daniel mentioned a school project about family trees that triggered questions about their paternal lineage. Alex boasted about how good he was at math, hinting he got that from Dad. Marissa said she wanted to be an architect one day, to design tall towers like the ones Daddy built. Every mention of Daddy tore at Jonathan's heart. At one point, Caroline stepped out to field a phone call, leaving Jonathan alone with the triplets. The hush was awkward at first until Marissa asked if he had any toys in his office. He had none, of course, but he offered them the view of the city from his window. All three rushed over, pressing their faces against the glass, marveling at the distance below. For a moment, Jonathan stood back, letting the sweetness of their innocent wonder wash over him. An inexplicable surge of protectiveness swelled. These were his children, flesh and blood he never knew he had. Caroline's reappearance sparked a chain reaction that extended beyond the walls of Jonathan's office. Melissa discreetly alerted security to maintain privacy, but rumors spread quickly among Crosstech employees that the boss had unannounced visitors, a woman and 3 kids who were a mirror image of him. Whispers filled the corridors, fueling speculation about Jonathan's secret family. Later that evening, when Caroline mentioned she hadn't booked a hotel, Jonathan found himself offering them the guest suite in his penthouse. The children, exhausted from traveling, were relieved. Caroline hesitated, suspecting ulterior motives or hidden resentments, but relented when Jonathan insisted he only wanted to ensure they were comfortable. That night, tension simmered in the penthouse. Caroline settled the kids in, coaxing them to sleep, while Jonathan paced restlessly in his home office. He fired off an email canceling his morning meetings, his mind too jumbled to focus on corporate details. Memories of their fiery relationship kept flashing, colliding with a new reality, the living proof that everything had changed. Just past midnight, Caroline ventured into his office. She confessed that she'd been laid off from her investigative role due to downsizing at her newspaper. She also revealed the children had asked about meeting their father for months, and with her job loss, she finally gathered the courage to come forward. Jonathan listened, torn between anger at being denied fatherhood for 7 years and empathy for Caroline's precarious situation. The next morning, the triplets awoke to a breakfast feast prepared by Jonathan's housekeeper, Marion, a gentlewoman who had worked for him for 5 years. The children devoured pancakes and fresh fruit in gleeful abandon, their excitement painting the penthouse with a warmth Jonathan hadn't experienced in years. Caroline sat at the dining table, scanning job postings on her tablet. Her lips tightened with worry. Raising 3 kids was expensive, and her savings were dwindling. She half expected Jonathan to lash out, to demand an apology or retribution for the years of secrecy. Instead, he quietly offered his help. Jonathan assured her she could stay in Chicago as long as needed. He even mentioned knowing people at the Chicago Tribune who might be interested in a seasoned investigative journalist. Caroline's face flushed with gratitude and an underlying disbelief. The Jonathan she left behind had been obsessively ambitious, prone to moral ambiguity in his relentless drive. But this Jonathan, While still exuding the confidence of a titan, seemed softer around the edges, a man changed by years of reflection. Still, unspoken tension lingered. When the children raced off to explore the penthouse, Jonathan asked Caroline for a private word. They settled in the living room, where floor-to-ceiling windows framed the bustling city. He fixed his gaze on her. "I need you to explain. Completely," he said, voice thick with both hurt and urgency. "I lost 7 years with them. I deserve to know why." Caroline recounted the days following their separation, emphasizing how deeply fractured and volatile their relationship had become. She discovered her pregnancy just as the tabloids began linking Jonathan's name to questionable deals. She feared that bringing children into his orbit, under intense media scrutiny, might inflict more harm than good. Then there was her pride, carrying the emotional wounds of their split. She couldn't bring herself to beg for Jonathan's support. She was determined to raise the children independently. With support from her close friend Karen Smith, she found a modest apartment and continued working, determined never to let her children feel the neglect Jonathan had once experienced from his own father. "I was wrong not to tell you," Caroline admitted, tears glimmering in her eyes. "Every day I watched them grow, and a part of me knew you deserved that joy too. But I was terrified of how different you'd become, chasing success at any cost. I worried what that might do to them." Jonathan felt as if he'd been punched. He regretted the darker path he had taken back then, the aggressive expansions, the morally gray partnerships. All of it felt so distant now, but it had cast a long shadow. He placed a hand on Caroline's arm, a fragile olive branch. "I can't change the past," he said hoarsely, "but I want to be there for them now." Within days, the world knew. Photos leaked of Jonathan escorting Caroline and the triplets in and out of Cross Tech Tower. Headlines exploded. "Tech mogul's secret triplets exposed." Tabloids spun salacious narratives about Jonathan's hidden past, while more reputable outlets asked why a champion of transparency had concealed 3 children from the public eye. Jonathan's PR team scrambled to contain the fallout. Even though he'd had no idea about the children, media storms rarely spared the innocent. Investors demanded explanations, worried about the stability of Crosstech's leadership. Some framed the news as a testament to Jonathan's duplicity, insinuating that if he could hide 3 children, what else might he be hiding? Melissa Clark spent sleepless nights drafting official statements. She urged Jonathan to host a press conference, to appear genuine and forthright. Caroline, unsettled by the sudden spotlight, was conflicted. She hated tabloid culture. But after seeing how her children were thrust into the public eye, she agreed that a controlled statement might protect them. So Jonathan, swallowing his nerves, stood at the podium in the Crosstech auditorium. Cameras flashed in a dizzying staccato of light. He calmly introduced the world to Alex, Daniel, and Marissa, his children, and reaffirmed his commitment to provide them a stable, loving environment. The unexpected vulnerability in his voice and the quiet presence of Caroline beside him softened public opinion. But the seeds of scandal had already taken root. Enter Richard Townsend, a longtime rival from Jonathan's Stanford days. He was the CEO of Scion Cyber, a competing tech giant. Known for his ruthless business tactics, Townsend seized this opportunity to undermine Jonathan's credibility. During a quarterly Scion Cyber press briefing, Townsend made offhand remarks about how personal scandals can shake consumer trust and how a responsible CEO would never compromise his company's integrity with secret families. Though he never mentioned Jonathan by name, the innuendo was obvious. Jonathan seethed. He remembered Townsend too well, an arrogant classmate who once tried to steal Caroline's investigative notes for personal gain. The tension between them had escalated over the years into bitter corporate showdowns. Townsend had a habit of exploiting any vulnerability to tarnish Jonathan's reputation. As if the public chaos wasn't enough, Townsend also launched a hostile PR campaign, insinuating Crosstech was on shaky ground with an unpredictable CEO. Stocks wobbled, employees grew uneasy, and the board of directors urged Jonathan to squash the rumors and salvage the company's image. Meanwhile, Caroline observed these corporate chess moves with alarm. She saw how stress lines deepened around Jonathan's eyes. Even the children noticed their father's mounting tension. Fearful that her return had triggered this corporate war, Caroline wrestled with guilt. Despite everything, Jonathan reassured her that protecting their children and the life they might build was his top priority. Amid the whirlwind, the triplets attempted to adapt to life in Chicago. Jonathan enrolled them in a private school known for its rigorous academics and emphasis on arts, a place that also offered discretion for high-profile families. He even found a roomy apartment near his penthouse for Caroline, ensuring they could be close by. He carved out time from his jam-packed schedule to help with homework, attend parent orientation, and learn about their hobbies. Alex joined a soccer club, Daniel developed an interest in robotics, and Marissa took painting classes. Each day brought new revelations, quirky habits, shared jokes, favorite foods. Jonathan discovered he enjoyed cooking with them, letting them stir pancake batter on Saturday mornings. These simple moments proved more exhilarating than any boardroom triumph. Still, the complexities of co-parenting with Caroline lingered. She was fiercely independent, reluctant to accept his financial assistance beyond the children's needs. Once, when he offered to hire a driver for her, she bristled, reminding him she was perfectly capable of navigating Chicago on her own. These little flare-ups highlighted the wounds they both still carried. Yet slowly, a fragile bond began to bloom, a sense of unity they had never achieved before. For Jonathan, fatherhood awakened a tenderness he'd long suppressed. Each laugh from the triplets, every bedtime story, felt like a second chance to be the dad he never had, and possibly to mend what he once broke with Caroline. Just as Jonathan began finding footing with his newfound family, the legal storm arrived. A mysterious tip reached the city's district attorney's office, claiming Crosstech engaged in a cover-up involving data privacy violations, echoes of Jonathan's earliest controversies. Townsend was the likely culprit behind these allegations, digging up any remnants of scandal to destabilize Jonathan's empire. The DA launched an investigation, requesting thousands of documents from Crosstech's servers. Old rumors surfaced about questionable partnerships that predated the company's cleanup initiatives, fueling speculation of wrongdoing. Jonathan insisted his firm had adhered to strict ethical standards for years, but the media latched onto any whiff of impropriety. Caroline found herself torn in a moral quandary. As a journalist, she believed in truth and transparency. Part of her wanted to sift through the allegations, to discover if any had merit. But another part, the part that cared about Jonathan and the stability of their children's lives, wanted to shield him. The tension between them escalated. Late one evening, Caroline confronted him in his office, documents in hand. "I have sources, Jonathan," she said, voice trembling with urgency. "They suggest someone within Crosstech is feeding Townsend, someone close to you. If it's true, this could get ugly fast." Jonathan stared at her, betrayal churning in his gut. Who among his trusted inner circle would sell him out? And how far would Townsend go to see him ruined? After a frantic week of inquiries, Melissa stumbled upon suspicious email correspondence linking Kenneth Daniels, Crosstech's vice president of operations, to Townsend's legal counsel. Daniels was a longtime employee, once loyal, but evidently resentful after being passed over for a promotion. Now he appeared to be funneling sensitive data to Scion Cyber in exchange for promised wealth and influence. When Jonathan confronted Daniels behind closed doors, the man's facade cracked. He admitted frustration at Jonathan's family drama, hogging headlines, and overshadowing his own contributions to the company. Townsend, the cunning snake that he was, promised Daniels a better future at Scion Cyber if he helped orchestrate a scandal that would dethrone Jonathan. Furious yet composed, Jonathan threatened legal action. Daniels retaliated by claiming to have more incriminating evidence about Crosstech's early years. A swirl of accusations ensued until security escorted Daniels out of the building. The damage, however, had been done. That evening, Jonathan revealed the betrayal to Caroline. She listened in growing alarm, aware that even baseless accusations could spark endless government scrutiny. Her journalist instincts flared, warning her that the story might get even bigger. She wanted to protect Jonathan, but also to protect herself and the children. A sliver of dread crept in as she recalled the bitter arguments that destroyed their marriage. Now, powerful forces threatened to destroy Jonathan's life, and by extension, their fragile new family. In the face of corporate upheaval, Jonathan found solace in his children's presence. Each evening, no matter how frantic his day had been, he returned home in time to read bedtime stories or hear about their day at school. One night, Daniel presented him with a small robot he'd built in a weekend workshop, beaming with pride. Marissa showed off her watercolor paintings of the Chicago skyline, each stroke capturing the city's grandeur through a child's eyes. Alex regaled him with stories of soccer practice, brimming with excitement for the upcoming tournament. These moments grounded Jonathan, reminding him that life was bigger than boardrooms and corporate betrayals. Caroline, witnessing his devotion, felt torn between gratitude and the haunting memory of how they once lost each other to ambition. One crisp Saturday, Jonathan took them all to Navy Pier. They rode the Ferris wheel, laughing as the cold wind nipped at their cheeks. Caroline and Jonathan exchanged awkward smiles when the kids demanded they ride together. High above the city, the children giggled while the ex-spouses sat side by side, hearts pounding with the memory of a love once shared. For a fleeting instant, Jonathan imagined what life might have been if they had never parted, if he had chosen ethics and family over relentless achievement. Caroline, too, seemed lost in thought, her gaze lingering on him as the Ferris wheel dipped back toward the ground. Crosstech's board of directors scheduled an emergency meeting. Jonathan entered the conference room to find a tense gathering. Some directors feared the ongoing investigation and negative press would degrade investor confidence. Others worried Townsend's sabotage was only the beginning of a more protracted war, one that Crosstech might not win without decisive leadership. In a heated discussion, board member Carl Porter questioned Jonathan's judgment. Maybe you should take a leave of absence until the dust settles. You're too embroiled in personal issues, and the accusations keep piling up. Jonathan bristled. A leave of absence? He glanced around the table, searching for allies. While a few directors nodded, others looked uncertain. I've founded this company. I've transformed it into a global powerhouse. Walking away now would only validate Townsend's claims. The room crackled with tension. Melissa, who attended as Jonathan's chief aide, spoke up. Mr. Cross is our leader. If we abandon him, we invite chaos. We need to stand united. Her loyalty galvanized several board members, but the vote was far from unanimous. Tensions escalated until a compromise emerged. A narrower executive oversight committee to guide Jonathan while he handled the legal quagmire. Sensing the board's mistrust, Jonathan reluctantly agreed, determined to prove his integrity and keep Crosstech's vision intact. As he left the meeting, he vowed to himself that he would not let Townsend or anyone destroy what he had built. The situation grew more ominous when Jonathan received a phone call from an unknown number. A distorted voice threatened to leak fabricated documents, purporting to prove Crosstech engaged in widespread illegal data harvesting unless he publicly admitted guilt and paid an exorbitant sum. Jonathan's blood ran cold. This was extortion, likely orchestrated by Townsend or someone in his orbit, aiming to bury him under a mountain of false scandals. Jonathan promptly contacted the authorities. Meanwhile, Caroline insisted on digging deeper, determined to help. She reached out to old sources from her investigative reporting days, meticulously piecing together Townsend's network of cronies. She even discovered hush payments that connected Townsend's personal attorney to Daniel's, confirming the sabotage was an elaborate scheme. Their renewed partnership, though it revolved around crisis, rekindled the spark they once shared. Late nights found them in Jonathan's study, scrutinizing documents while the children slept. A sense of camaraderie returned, overshadowing past betrayals. But Townsend was cunning. On the eve of a critical Crosstech product launch, he leaked stories to the press suggesting Jonathan faced imminent legal charges. Stock prices teetered in response. The board grew restless. Even the triplets noticed the tension, asking if Dad was in trouble at work. Jonathan tried to smile it away, but his sleepless eyes and clenched jaw told another story. Amid this escalating battle, Jonathan found himself confronting an even older wound. One afternoon, Caroline returned from an errand to find him quietly staring at a dusty photo of his father, a man who'd abandoned him so many years ago. Jonathan rarely spoke of him, but the parallels were undeniable. Here he was, grappling with fatherhood, haunted by the mistakes of his own father. I always wondered if I'd be just like him, Jonathan confessed in a low voice, leaving my children to chase my own pursuits. Caroline's eyes softened. "But you didn't choose to leave," she replied, acknowledging her role in keeping the kids away. "He gave up on you. You never gave up on them. You just didn't know." Jonathan exhaled shakily, the raw pain of paternal betrayal surfacing. "I just want to do right by them," he whispered. Caroline placed her hand gently on his shoulder. Their eyes met, sharing a moment of understanding. They might never fix the past, but they could guide the future. Bolstered by that catharsis, Jonathan resolved to face the brewing corporate war with unwavering resolve. He had spent his life running from ghosts, his father's desertion, the heartbreak with Caroline, the moral gray areas of his early businesses. Now, with 3 children he barely knew but already loved fiercely, he decided it was time to fight back, not just to salvage Crosstech, but to become a man worthy of his family's trust. A break in the case came when Caroline's sources uncovered Townsend's direct link to falsified documents intended for the DA's office. Armed with that evidence, Jonathan scheduled a private meeting with the DA, accompanied by Caroline and a respected attorney named Amanda Stone. They presented the proof of Townsend's machinations, including digital footprints tying Townsend's shell companies to Daniels in the extortion call. Stunned by the revelations, the DA agreed to halt the investigation into Crosstech, pending a formal review of Townsend's conduct. Elated but cautious, Jonathan knew the fight wasn't over until Townsend's duplicity was fully exposed. That very evening, Townsend called an emergency press conference to counter the mounting rumors. Jonathan and Caroline watched the broadcast together, their hearts pounding. Townsend calmly denied any wrongdoing, painting Jonathan as a desperate man trying to shift blame. But halfway through Townsend's rebuttal, Caroline's colleague, an investigative journalist at the Chicago Tribune, released an explosive article detailing the evidence of Townsend's scheme, replete with direct quotes from official documents. The article caused an immediate media firestorm. Townsend stumbled through the rest of his statement as accusations of conspiracy echoed in every reporter's question. By midnight, Townsend's stock price plummeted, and his board demanded accountability. Jonathan had played his final move perfectly, with Caroline's help, illuminating the truth behind Townsend's campaign of sabotage. In the weeks that followed, Townsend resigned from Cyber under intense public pressure, narrowly avoiding criminal charges by striking a deal with prosecutors. Crosstech's board, finally seeing Jonathan's vindication, offered their renewed support. The triplets no longer asked if their father was in trouble. Instead, they cheered him on each time he left for the office. Slowly but surely, Jonathan, Caroline, and the children found a sense of normalcy. Caroline, with Jonathan's discreet recommendation, landed a position at the Chicago Tribune, where her investigative prowess was celebrated. She continued to live in the apartment near Jonathan's penthouse, and the children delighted in being able to bounce between the 2 spaces. Occasionally, Jonathan and Caroline had quiet dinners together, just the 2 of them, sharing laughs and discussing the kids' progress. Neither rushed the question of reigniting their romance, both aware that trust is rebuilt step by cautious step. Yet in each other's eyes they glimpsed a tenderness that refused to fade. They had been broken once, but perhaps they could forge a stronger bond now, in the glow of truth and shared responsibility. Jonathan realized that wealth and power, for all their allure, paled in comparison to the fragile joys of family. For the first time, he felt truly alive, free from the burdens of the past. A new chapter was unfolding, one that began the moment Caroline knocked on his door, triplets in tow, pulling him back into the life he never knew he needed. As autumn transitioned to winter in Chicago, the city donned a blanket of snow. Each snowflake felt like a fresh start, drifting silently over roads and rooftops. On one such evening, Jonathan found himself at a parent-teacher meeting for the triplets' school, an experience he never imagined he would have just months prior. He introduced himself to other parents, many of whom recognized him from business magazines. Their curious glances were quickly replaced by warm smiles when they saw how dedicated he was to his children. Daniel's teacher praised his budding talent for coding, describing him as a natural problem solver who approached challenges with calm determination. Alex's coach highlighted his leadership on the soccer field, while Maurice's art teacher gushed over her creative vision and attention to detail. Throughout the evening, Jonathan felt an odd mixture of pride and regret. He couldn't shake the thought of how many milestones he had missed. Their first steps, first words, birthdays. Yet the present moment showed him there was still so much to experience. Science fair projects, school plays, holiday concerts. A kaleidoscope of future memories beckoned. Caroline joined him for the last few teacher conferences, her eyes bright with pride. When they walked out into the chilly night, she spotted him gazing fondly at the triplets as they made snow angels on the front lawn of the school. She placed a gloved hand on his arm, and in that simple touch, he felt a bridge forming between their hearts, one step closer to reconciliation. The holiday season arrived with glittering lights and festive carols echoing through Chicago streets. Jonathan had never been particularly sentimental about Christmas, often flying overseas for deals or hunkering down in his penthouse to avoid forced holiday cheer. But this year the triplets buzzed with excitement at the thought of celebrating together as a family. Caroline and the children decided to decorate a grand Christmas tree in Jonathan's living room. The kids carefully hung ornaments, each one with personal significance. Daniel placed a homemade robot ornament, Alex hung a soccer ball ornament, and Marisa delicately tied up a small easel ornament she'd painted. As the twinkling lights reflected in their eyes, Jonathan felt an unfamiliar glow of contentment. In the midst of this warmth, an unexpected visitor arrived. James Cross, Jonathan's estranged uncle, whom he hadn't seen in years. James had served as a father figure after Jonathan's dad disappeared, but eventually drifted away. Now, hearing of Jonathan's new family situation, James wanted to reconnect. Their reunion was awkward at first, Jonathan still harboring resentment for how James had stopped checking in once Jonathan achieved fame. Yet James apologized earnestly, explaining that he'd felt overshadowed and intimidated by Jonathan's success. The pair reconciled over mugs of hot cocoa, watched by Caroline and the children, who were fascinated by this distant relative. Later that night, Jonathan confided in Caroline how this small act of familial healing reminded him that everyone deserves a second chance, and that redemption was possible, even for broken families. As the months went by, Caroline and Jonathan's interactions began to shift from guarded civility to a gentle, unspoken intimacy. Neither wanted to force the issue, especially with the children watching. Still, they shared more dinners at the penthouse, lingered over coffee in the mornings, and found excuses to chat after tucking the kids into bed. One evening, while the children were at a sleepover birthday party, Jonathan invited Caroline to stay and watch an old movie they both loved as undergrads. They laughed at the same lines that used to crack them up years ago. When the credits rolled, Caroline looked over at Jonathan with a soft smile. "Remember how we used to dream about traveling the world?" she mused. "We had a list of all the places we'd go, pinned to our dorm room wall." Jonathan nodded, nostalgia brimming in his eyes. "Rome, Paris, Tokyo," he recited. "I haven't seen half those places. I was always too busy." She slipped her hand into his, and the warmth of that simple gesture pulsed through him. There was a fragility in her voice when she asked, "Do you think we could ever make those trips together?" His answer came in the form of a tender kiss, a hesitant yet heartfelt gesture that spoke of longing, regret, and hope. It was as if the years between them melted away for that brief instant, leaving only the young dreamers they once were, lost in each other's embrace. News outlets, initially relentless in spinning Jonathan's secret children into a scandal, shifted their narrative. Stories now emerged about a powerful CEO championing a balanced work-family life. The public, especially parents, empathized with Jonathan's desire to be present for his kids. A few tabloids tried to spark rumors of a rekindled romance between him and Caroline, but they mostly steered clear of the invasive extremes they once indulged in. Meanwhile, cross-texts soared to new heights. The fiasco with Townsend had ironically bolstered the company's reputation for transparency after Jonathan exposed the sabotage. Investors regained trust, admiring Jonathan's resilience. His leadership style evolved too. He began granting employees greater flexibility for their families, introduced mentorship programs, and even spearheaded a charitable fund to support underprivileged youth in tech education, an homage to his own challenging childhood. At the Chicago Tribune, Caroline garnered praise for her investigative reporting, which shone a light on social justice issues. She wrote a series of articles about corporate abuses that prompted legislative discussions. Occasionally, Jonathan found himself reading her work with admiration, recalling how her passion for truth had once collided with his ambition, and how those collisions had shaped both of them. In interviews, Jonathan refused to delve into personal details, politely but firmly diverting questions about Caroline and the children. Nonetheless, an image of a steady, family-centric man was emerging, a man drastically different from the one who had once lost his marriage in the whirlwind of success. On a crisp, sunlit day, exactly 1 year after Caroline's dramatic arrival in Chicago, Jonathan gathered her and the children for a special outing. They drove an hour outside the city to a serene lake surrounded by towering pines. A small pier jutted out over calm waters that glittered in the afternoon light. Jonathan led the family to a cozy cabin he'd rented for the weekend. Inside, a roaring fireplace cast dancing shadows across rustic wooden walls. The children squealed with delight, running around the open living space to pick their bedrooms. Caroline took in the view of the lake, her breath catching at its tranquility. That evening, after the triplets were nestled in their bunk beds, Caroline and Jonathan sat on the deck, wrapped in blankets, sipping hot cider. He turned to her, his voice quivering with emotions no longer so easily contained. "This past year has changed me in ways I never imagined," he began. "I've rediscovered that life isn't just about building corporations, it's about building bonds, too, with our children, with us." Caroline's eyes shone under the moonlight. "I'm scared," she admitted, "scared of repeating old mistakes, of heartbreak, but I'm more scared of losing what we've started rebuilding." Jonathan gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. "We can't change our past, but we can shape the future. Together." In that quiet moment, under a sky brimming with stars, they sealed their renewed commitment with a kiss, hopeful, fragile, and deeply real. Time, they discovered, was the ultimate healer. Over the following months, Caroline and Jonathan moved beyond cautious embraces and into a genuine reawakening of their love. It was different now, more mature, tempered by heartbreak and shaped by parenthood. They found joy in the mundane, grocery shopping with the children, attending weekend soccer games, or simply curling up on the couch after a long day. The triplets, sensing their parents' closeness, showered them with delighted approval. "Are you going to marry Mommy again?" Marisa asked one morning, her eyes sparkling with childlike innocence. The question prompted a flush of pink on Jonathan's cheeks and a gentle laugh from Caroline. They exchanged smiles, promising the children they'd let them know if anything changed. Secretly, each wondered if such a thing could be on the horizon. Meanwhile, Jonathan's mother, Linda Cross, visited from Portland. She had tears in her eyes as she finally met her grandchildren for the first time. The family took a trip to the Art Institute of Chicago, marveling at paintings while the triplets asked grandmotherly questions that made Linda beam. That evening, Linda pulled her son aside, whispering her gratitude that he was no longer alone in a world of boardrooms and business deals. Jonathan felt an overwhelming sense of completeness, as though every rough edge in his life was finally smoothing out. The circle of family he'd always yearned for was forming, and for the first time since childhood, he allowed himself to believe he deserved it. The setting couldn't have been more different than their impulsive college proposal years ago. This time, Jonathan planned every detail. He rented a private event space at Chicago's Millennium Park, coordinating with staff to keep the site intimate after hours. Under the glow of the city lights, a small path was lined with flickering lanterns leading to a makeshift archway. Caroline arrived with the children, all dressed warmly against the crisp evening air. The triplets, in on the surprise, led her giggling toward the arch. There stood Jonathan, hands clasped, heart thundering in his chest. Soft music played from hidden speakers, a delicate melody that carried through the tranquil night. He knelt on one knee, gazing up at Caroline's wide eyes, her breath already catching in astonishment. "We once rushed into marriage," he said softly, voice trembling with emotion. "We had big dreams, but we weren't ready for the world. Now after everything, finding each other again, raising these beautiful kids, weathering scandals and heartbreak, I know I never want to lose this. Lose us." He opened a small box, revealing a simple yet elegant diamond ring. "Caroline Matthews, will you marry me? Again, and let's do it right this time." Tears trickled down Caroline's cheeks. She nodded, too choked up to speak, and pulled him to his feet. The children erupted into cheers, hugging their parents. In the heart of Chicago's most iconic park, two souls who had once lost each other found a second chance at forever. Their second wedding was a more modest affair, a blend of close family, loyal friends, and a handful of business associates who had become like family. The ceremony took place in a sunlit garden just outside the city. There were no paparazzi, no grandiose displays of wealth, just genuine smiles and the quiet hum of laughter and tears of joy. Caroline wore a flowing ivory gown, and Jonathan wore a sleek tuxedo. The triplets served as ring bearers and a flower girl, practically bouncing with excitement. Linda Cross read a heartfelt poem, while James Cross toasted the couple with a warm speech about the power of forgiveness and resilience. When they exchanged vows, their words resonated with deeper meaning, shaped by a journey of shattered trust and earned redemption. Jonathan promised to prioritize family over corporate ambitions, to remain true to the moral compass Caroline had always loved about him. Caroline vowed to stand by his side, to trust him fully, and to share her deepest fears instead of running from them. As they sealed their vows with a kiss, the triplets clapped and shouted, "Yay, Mommy and Daddy!" confetti drifting around them like a shower of blessings. Music swelled, and the newlywed couple walked hand in hand down the aisle, a testament that love, no matter how broken, could be pieced together stronger than before. Life carried on after the wedding, beautifully ordinary yet tinged with the extraordinary sense of gratitude that accompanies second chances. Jonathan stepped back from micromanaging Crosstech, delegating more responsibilities to trusted executives so he could spend afternoons coaching Alex's soccer team or helping Daniel develop new coding projects. Caroline thrived at the Chicago Tribune, breaking stories that earned her a national reputation. She maintained a firm boundary between her role as a journalist and her personal ties to a high-profile CEO. Nonetheless, her dedication to honest reporting, once a cause for division, became a cornerstone of the trust she and Jonathan rebuilt. Together, they turned Jonathan's penthouse into a family-friendly haven. The once sterile walls now boasted children's artwork, family photos, and souvenirs from brief trips they took. Weekend getaways to Lake Geneva, a family reunion in Portland, a short jaunt to New York. They talked about traveling abroad once the children were a bit older, revisiting the old dream of seeing Rome, Paris, and Tokyo. In the quiet of each evening, after the kids were asleep, Jonathan and Caroline would share a glass of wine, reflecting on how far they'd come. They hadn't conquered some fairy tale fantasy. They'd confronted harsh realities, personal flaws, and corporate threats. Yet in doing so, they emerged with a deeper, more authentic bond, one capable of weathering the storms ahead. The past was no longer a looming ghost. It was a reminder of how precious the present truly was. Sometime later, on a chilly afternoon, Jonathan and Caroline strolled through Chicago's Grant Park with the triplets. The children raced ahead, feeding ducks by the pond and shrieking with laughter. Overhead, a brilliant autumn sky crowned their joy. It was in these simple family outings that Jonathan felt the full scope of his life's transformation. He was no longer defined solely by board meetings and corporate conquests. He was defined by the love he shared with Caroline and the laughter of 3 children who bore his eyes and his heart. Yes, he was a CEO. He still managed a billion-dollar empire, but he was also a husband once more, a father learning the nuances of parenthood, and a man who had finally made peace with his past. The regret that once gnawed at him had softened, replaced by a quiet determination to ensure his children knew they were cherished. With Caroline's hand in his, Jonathan watched as she smiled at the children, their faces flushed with excitement. He recalled the first day she showed up at his office, trembling yet resolute, 3 tiny figures in tow. How everything changed with that single knock. That moment, once drenched in shock and confusion, had become the turning point toward a future brimming with promise. Stepping forward, they joined their children by the pond, arms linked in a tapestry of love and second chances. Together, they had rewritten their story, proving that even the deepest scars could yield to healing, and that sometimes miracles arrived in triplicate. This is a story of resilience, second chances, in the fearless pursuit of a love worth saving. Jonathan Cross believed he could bury the past by scaling new heights in the corporate world. Yet fate reminded him that true fulfillment lies in human connections, not polished facades. Caroline's return with the triplets became both his greatest shock and his greatest salvation. Their journey from estranged spouses to a reunited family captures the power of forgiveness and the triumph of the human heart over ambition and regret. If you found yourself moved by Jonathan and Caroline's path, by the heartbreak, the perseverance, and the hard-won victory of devotion, consider sharing this video with friends who might need a dose of hope. Let's spread the message that no matter how complicated our histories, love and compassion can guide us to redemption. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe for more heart-stirring tales.